Welcome to the latest installment of my Fundamentals of Engineering Examination Preparation program. Today I'm going to talk about the calculator, one of the most critical things that you need to know going into that test. These are the two high-end calculators that are allowed for the FE exam. One is the TI-36X Pro, and the other one is the Casio FX115. Either calculator will work for you. However, this particular video is going to focus on the TI calculator. I hope you enjoy and get something educational out of it. Now for part 5 of my Fundamentals of Engineering FE Examination Preparation course. This part will specifically focus on using the TI-36X Pro calculator to the best advantage during the FE exam. The NCEES calculator policy, they limit the types of calculators examinees may bring to the exam site. The following calculator models are the only ones acceptable by class: Casio, all FX115 and FX991 models. Must have 115 or 991 in its model name. Hewlett-Packard, the HP33S and the HP35S models, but no others. The Texas Instruments, all TI-30X and TI-36X models. Must have TI-30X or TI-36X in its model name. The one we'll be focusing on is the TI-36X for this video. This is the overall agenda as it stands today for this program. Today is part 5, but it's actually going to be video number 6. Just to let you know now, I may have to break this up into 2 videos because of its length. I'll decide that once I start the editing process. Part 5. The online FE test experience, where to go quickly. The first thing I suggest you do is get the PDF versions of the manuals for both of the TI and the Casio calculators. They can be found online. Shown here, we have the 2 links to the various websites where the PDF of those 2 can be downloaded. Shown here is what I did after I downloaded the manual for the TI-36X Pro. I printed it out in full 8.5/11 sheets. Then I brought it to a local stationery store that bound it for me. The original manual that comes with the calculator is actually a very small pamphlet, as shown here. It's approximately 1/4 of the size, both in terms of page size and font size. There are things that I will not be covering in today's video. First of all, I will not go over classic mode, except to introduce it. I also will not cover the math num functions, such as the abs, for absolute value to round, and etc. Those are pretty straightforward, and I don't think they need any particular tutorial from me to show you how to use those. I also will not do the same for percentages for the same reason. They are pretty straightforward. It's one of those things that is, in my opinion, de-emphasized during the FE exam. Now there are 2 things, the memory and stored variables and the function table, that I am intentionally not covering and that are not necessarily easy to use. However, those represent possible NCEES issues, since you can actually store data in the calculator and bring it with you into the test room, including entire formulas. For example, if you wanted to put in the formula for calculating standard deviation, which is not a standard function in this calculator, you could actually do that. And I believe that NCEES might raise an issue with that. I have heard tell through bulletin boards that I've read that some test centers around the country will actually make you do a full reset of the calculator before you can bring it into the room. And I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. I also will not cover expression evaluations, since that is very, very simple. You don't even need the calculator to do those. They're towards the end of the manual if you want to look those up. And also constants and conversions. I will not cover those because the actual FE manual that you will have available to you as a PDF does a better job at providing all of the constants and conversions that you need to know about. And finally, I will not talk about battery replacement. The battery can be replaced. It's simply a matter of turning it over, getting a very small, like a number 1 Phillips screwdriver, taking off 6 screws, removing the back cover, which you may need a flat blade screwdriver or possibly a dull knife, like a butter knife, to open it up, and then you can replace the CR2032 battery. There are basic functions that you should know about. I won't give you specific examples of them here, but I will mention them. The second function key, you will see me use that in the examples through this video. It is a gray key with black letters, and you need it to access certain secondary key functions. The power on and off. The power on is pretty easy. There's an on key at the bottom, but to turn it off, you got to hit the second key before you hit that key, the same key, in order to turn the calculator off. You could also just wait until it times out and turns itself off, but then you might be stretching the battery charge. Although this calculator does have a light power source available to it, there is enough power available in the actual test center on the little desk to give you to where that is functioning properly. I didn't have a problem with that, but the battery is really a backup to that. The scientific and engineering modes, well, it defaults to normal mode, which is standard calculator functions with a decimal point that could go all the way out to the entire display. However, you can change it to either scientific mode or engineering mode, and I'll talk about those in the video. Also, which angle mode do you want? Do you want it to be in degrees, radians, or gradients? It defaults to degrees, but you can change it to radians. And some test questions may ask for the answers in radians. So at the very least, you have to know how to convert those. The number-based modes, it supports hex, binary, octal, and decimal, and you can mix them up in the same calculation. There's a way to define each number as any one of those types. Real numbers, it supports both the rectangular form and the angular form. So the rectangular form is a plus bi, which is a real part plus an imaginary part, and the angular form is r angle degree, which is the radius from the center and what angle from the x-axis that radius has been declared at. And we'll talk more about that. Just to show you the difference between classic mode and math print mode, which is what I'll be using in this video, math print. The classic mode uses characters primarily, and a couple of special ones, like sort of a blocked underscore, to indicate a fraction that has a whole part and a fraction part. Whereas in math print mode, it looks as you would expect it to look in a textbook. So a whole number 3 and 5/6, for example. It's the same number shown here, but one is in classic mode and one is in math print mode. Then there's the general math functions, and there are math numbers. There's the DMS, which represents degree, minute, second, and I'll be talking about that in the video. And then there's the conversions between rectangular and polar form for real numbers. And finally, the reset function, which I'll show you right now. So the calculator is shown on the right-hand side of the screen right now, which will be common throughout this video. If you turn the calculator on, you hit the on switch, and you want to do a full reset, which I mentioned. I heard some test centers make you do this before they let you take it in. Then you hit the second key, this gray key right here, and then you hit this 0 key, and the secondary function to the 0 key is reset. It will confirm either yes or no. You can type in the number. For example, I want to confirm it as yes. I hit 2, and it does it, and indicates that the job is done, memory has cleared. You then hit the clear key to go back to a blank slate. Let me show you how to enable engineering mode. So with a blank slate, we will now hit the mode button. We will go down to the second row of options. It's currently in normal mode. I will use this little scroll key, which has 4 arrows on it and sort of acts like a half mouse here. And I scroll over, hitting the right arrow to the engineering. It's blinking right now. I have to lock it in by hitting the enter key. Now you see the engineering symbol has, or 3-letter indicator has now appeared in the top small font line of the calculator. I then clear this, and it will stay that way until either I change it to something else or I decide to do a full system reset. So I will go ahead and change it back at this point. So I will hit mode down. It's by default blinking the normal. I'll hit enter and then I'll hit clear, and now that little ENG designation has disappeared. On the screen here I'm showing you mode, down arrow, then right arrow twice, and then hit enter to get into engineering mode. Now let's talk about fraction math. One thing that is supported very well by this calculator, one of the big pluses in terms of dealing, especially with some calculus problems, especially the integrals, which tend to be in fractions that you're dealing with, is that you can do the fraction math directly. So for example, you could type in things. This is the math print mode shown here on the screen, such as 9/11 plus 23/17, or down a little bit further, 71 and 53/11 divided by 4 and 3/17. The calculator can do those directly. So for example, here I want to divide 13/29 by 3/7. So what I will do here is say, go into the enter a fraction key, which is two little square boxes on top of each other right here in this key. I hit that. It opens up a special function here. I have to fill in those squares. So it's on the top one by default. I have to type in 13, and then I have to arrow down to the bottom part by hitting the little arrow on this little wheel here. And then I type in 29. Now you should always then at least arrow to the right whenever you're in one of these modes that you have to do data entry on the squares to get out of that particular fraction. Now I can do the divide. I hit the divide key, and I'll type in another fraction. I'll hit the same fraction key again, and I will type in 3 on top, 7 on bottom. I will get out of that fraction by arrowing to the right, and then I will hit enter. And it says 91/87. And the screen shows that that's what it should be. So you can convert it to the actual number with a whole number and the associated fraction if the number so supports that. You would hit the math key. You would go down just to the first choice where it shows a fraction that's being converted to a whole number fraction. And if you hit that, it's going to do that for the last answer I got. This is a very common thing to know with this calculator. By default, if you didn't clear that out, it takes the answer from the previous calculation and it applies it to the next function or calculation that you're doing. So all I have to do at this point is hit enter, and it converted it to 1 and 4/87. So the 91/87, pretty straightforward, that is 1 and 4/87. Now powers and roots. It supports a wide variety of power and root options. We have these special keys to do both, which you have to fill in the blanks. So for example, if I wanted to do this, the fourth root of the number 4,588, what I would do is I would hit the number 4 first, and then I would hit the fill in the root option, which is this one here. It's the secondary key under x to the power. That's the root to a root. So I hit second, and I hit that, and now it's automatically taken the 4 as the root that I want, and now I just have to type the number that I wish to get that fourth root of. I like to get out of it, so I always arrow right until that blinking arrow goes away, just out of habit, because sometimes that will cause you a problem. And then I just hit enter, and it says it's 8.23 approximately. And according to my previous calculation of this, that's exactly right. Rectangular and polar coordinates. You can convert between the two. So in the first case here, we're converting rectangular to polar, and you can convert from polar to rectangular. So for example, let's say I want to convert, now this is a tricky one, so you got to pay attention to this one. I want to convert 10 plus 6i, which is a rectangular form of the value of 10 as a real number and the value of 6 as an imaginary number. I want to convert that to its angular form, which is radius and angle. Well, to do that, clear this out, you have to actually go into Math, and right at the right hand side here, you do R to P. When you see a double arrow both ways, that means R to P or P to R. And you'll see that several functions do the same thing. So I scroll over to that one, and then I hit enter. No, I don't. I got to first select what I want to do. The first two choices are going from polar to one component of the rectangular. So in the number one, you're converting the full polar form over to the x component of a rectangular. The second one is getting the y component. The third one is the other option. We're doing real to polar. And in this case, we're going to get the radius. And if you go to the fourth one, we're getting the angle. So we got to do them separately. So we go to number 3 and we hit enter. But you don't type it the way it's shown on the screen here. You have to comma separate them. And the comma is a secondary key to the period. So you would type this into the actual function as 10, then you have to hit second, comma, and then you hit the 6. Now you don't have to close the parentheses. If the final thing is a single parenthesis, like this example, all I have to do is hit enter, and I get the answer. So it's saying 11.66. or 11.7 if we round it to 3 significant decimal points. Now, to get the other component, I have to now go math, back to this function again, but now I have to go down and pick option number 4, because I've gotten the actual radius, and now I need the angle. So I click on that one, hit enter, I do the same entry, 10, second, comma, 6, and I can just hit enter at this point, and it's saying 30.96. See what I did before when I calculated this? It was 11.7 and 30.96. So it's the same value that I had previously calculated. If you wanted to convert that to radians, which I might as well do now, I still have the number here, the 30.96. That's fine. I'll leave that there. But now I'm going to convert to radians. We were in decimal mode. So what I have to do, and I still have the actual function that I did, so that's important to show as an example as well. I'm going to go back into this after I can change it to mode radians. Now there is a way to convert between degree and radians, but it's buried in the menu system. I find this one easier, just to convert to radians. So I go into mode, and I click radian, and I hit enter. Now that I'm in radian mode, all I have to do is go back to the actual function that I had, this one here. I hit enter on that. It copies it down into my current executable line. But now it will function on the same numbers in radian mode. So when I hit enter now, what do I get? 0.540 radians, as shown on the screen. Trigonometry. It supports every known trigonometry function. The sine, the inverse sine, the sine hyperbolic, all of them. Not just sine, of course, but the same thing for cosine and tangent. The main keys that are provided to you are the ones that you hit them once. For example, if you want to do sine, you would hit that once. You want to do inverse sine, you would hit it twice. If you wanted to do hyperbolic, you hit it a third time. So even though it doesn't show it here, and that's true about a few of these keys, they don't always show the third option. You would hit it a third time. So I'll give you an example. If I hit this key once, it shows sine. If I hit it again, it shows sine inversed with the -1. If I hit it a third time, it shows sine h for sine hyperbolic. And that's true about all of them. And there are other keys like that as well that I'll be talking about. So, for example, I want to calculate this. Now I'm going to get a little more complicated here. I'm going to say 9 times the inverse tan of 30 degrees. Now, I'm leaving it in radian intentionally because I want to show you something. So if I type in 9, just as it's on the screen, times, I hit the tan button twice to get tan inverse, and then I type 30, but by default I'm in radian mode, so I've got to redefine that key. And I do that by hitting the math function and then going over to degree, minute, second. And in this mode you can convert the number to degrees, minutes, seconds, and a couple of other options, radian and gradient, and then back to just general DMS. I want it in degrees, so I'm going to put it on 1 and just hit enter. Look what it did. It put the degree symbol on there. So it is degree at this point. Again, I don't have to close the parentheses. I can just hit enter. It says 4.34 and change. What did I get the last time I did that? 4.34. Logarithms and exponential functions. I make a special note here about the log to a base. So you can actually define an arbitrary base to the log even though it doesn't show on the log key. So for example, if you hit the log key, which right now has ln and log, it implies that that's the only two options. So let me clear this out. So if you hit it once, it's ln for natural logarithm. You hit it twice, it's log to the base 10. But if you hit it a third time, it's log to an arbitrary base that you can specify here. So if you wanted to specify a base 5, you just type that in, and then you would calculate this thing to the base 5. And then e and 10 to a power are pretty straightforward. So let's do this example. I want to do log to base 6 of the number 1240 decimal. Now we're still in decimal mode. I did not convert it to a binary, octal, or hex, which I could have put the calculator in that fixed mode for all operations, but I did not do that. So it's in decimal by default. If I click that button again that I just showed, log, 3 times, it's asking for an arbitrary base. I type in 6, then I arrow over to the other square, which is where I put the number in that I want. In this case, 1240. And then I break out of it. It already has the closed paren, so I don't have to even worry about that. That's the calculation that I want. If I hit enter, I get 3.975. What did I get last time? 3.98, rounded off. Hopefully you've learned something today about some of the techniques to use in properly using the calculator. If you did gain something from it, do me a favor. It would be very helpful if you could subscribe to this channel. Simply click on the little head here, and there's no cost, and it's easy to do. It would really be helpful. Thank you.